Writing an effective summary. It's a tricky skill, and it takes practice, and no one's ever really perfect at it on the first try. So in order to summarize something, you first have to make sure that you fully understand what's going on, right? So in our 1963, the year that changed everything article, we know that this is sort of a summary of some of the major events in 1963 that really kicked the civil rights movement into high gear. Now, we're not going to read the whole thing right now. We're going to go back, because we've read it already. We're going to go back and we're going to look for key important details that we need to highlight. So, let's see. A number of major events took place. This dramatic battle in 1963. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a message that would inspire countless others. Okay, so all of this is pretty important. So I'm going to highlight that. It was called Letters from the Birmingham Jail. And he was arguing that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Okay, now I can put all of that into one sentence if I'm clever about it. So after I've gone into the assignment, I've clicked Submit Assignment, and I've clicked Create. I'm going to start with, I've got to include, because it's a summary, I've got to include the title of the article. So, in 1963, the year that changed everything, the civil rights movement in America was, I'll say, kicked into high gear after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote Letters from a Birmingham Jail arguing that injustice everywhere is a threat. Sorry, that's not correct. Injustice anywhere. I cannot type right now. I apologize. But to justice everywhere. Let me double check that quote, make sure that I'm right. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Okay, great. And there's my first sentence. So I've already sort of set the tone that this article is about the 1963 civil rights movement and what really started it. I'm going through the article sort of point by point. In early May, young people of Birmingham took the King's message to heart. All of this stuff is super important. So I'm going to highlight all of this. Now, I can't quote this whole paragraph, right? I've got to take, what is this? This is 4 to 7 sentences. I can't use this whole thing. I'm supposed to keep my summary to between 4 and 6 sentences. So how do I shrink? Well, let's take a look. So, the young people of Birmingham heard his message and marched through parts of downtown Birmingham. Now, notice that I say parts of downtown Birmingham. The article mentions specifics. They mention the 16th Street Baptist Church, and they mention the park, but I don't need to mention that because I'm summarizing, right? I don't need to mention all the names. I'm just going to talk about big picture stuff. People of Birmingham heard the downtown Birmingham, where they were treated horribly by angry mobs of white people and police with dogs and fire hoses. Semicolon. However, comma, after days, because it does say days, right? Let's go back and check. On the 7th day of the Children's Crusade, I don't need to mention what the name was. I don't know how many days. Just after days of protests, the City Council of Birmingham, let's double check. City officials agreed to negotiate with the community and ended local segregation. So let's summarize that. After a few days of protests, the city agreed to end local segregation laws. Okay, now that's 2 sentences, and I've already gotten about halfway through the article, which is pretty great. So, news of the Children's Crusade spread in the media, transformed the way the Americans saw civil rights movement. That's important. Scenes of children under attack were filmed and broadcast all over the world, setting off global outcry. Polls showed that America is believed... All right, great. Okay, so that's important. So, as news of the events in Birmingham spread, more protests erupted, powerful word there, across the nation. And greater awareness was made possible. That sounds awkward. Let's change that. And greater awareness was brought to the issues of racial inequality in America. Again, I don't need to say everything because I'm just trying to capture the big picture. Okay, so there's 3 sentences. Struggle for civil rights continue to be marked by violence. There's these specific examples here, but honestly, I don't need to use every single one of them. So I'm going to say that that one's pretty important. Summer brought a landmark event in civil rights history, March for Jobs and Freedoms. 16th Street Baptist Church. All of this is important. How can I get all this down into one sentence? Well, let's see. That summer, Dr. King led a march in Washington, D.C. that included his famous "I Have a Dream" speech in front of 200,000 people, semicolon, but all across the country, terrible violence continued against African Americans who were protesting, period. All right, pretty good. The struggle continued throughout 1963. Southern Regional Council's regular protest took place. Approximately 20,000 demonstrators with words and action. They demanded a demand for justice that could not be ignored. Okay, so I've got all the big stuff that the article needs. Now I just sort of got to finish my summary. 1963. So I'm summarizing my summary here in this last sentence. 1963 was a tremendously important year for the civil rights movement in America and would continue to be the launching pad of, again, that sounds awkward, and would change the course of American history. There we go. That sounds pretty good. All right. Now that's a summary. I took the big picture stuff that I needed to recognize and squished it down, because that's what a summary is essentially a compression, a squishing of the information into the most important stuff. And there you go. That's how to write an effective summary.